Welcome to Hood Champion Boxing and Sports. In boxing, you find a way to win or you find a way to lose. What's his name, man? Ward. Looks like he's actually going to have, Andre Ward is going to have a sports documentary done on his career. And there are some people who feel that he didn't do enough. And I think it's unfair to say that he didn't do enough. I think he did quite a bit. You're talking about somebody who's had 32 fights, 16 by KO. That's a 50% KO percentage. You got to give him some credit. And he hadn't lost since he was an amateur. So he went a long time winning fights. Okay? And he's fought a lot of really big names. And I would think that I would agree with people had Andre Ward not fought in the Super 6 tournament and cleared all of those guys out. If he would have never done that and just jumped ship when he did after the Kovalev fight, I would say there'd be a bit of a question mark lingering over his career. I would say right now there's still a bit of a question mark because he left so early, but he knew what he wanted for himself, for his family. He knew he wanted to have a life outside of boxing, which is very fortunate to be working with Top Rank. He's become one of the better commentators that we've seen when it comes to analyzing boxing and breaking down fights and actually giving I'm not going to say an unbiased perspective, but providing an acceptable perspective on what fighters are doing in the ring. But this documentary they're doing on him is supposed to drop early on Showtime in 2023. But when it comes to Andre Ward and his last few opponents, just take a look at it. Okay? Now, there's some fights he didn't make, but let's just look at the fact that he fought Kovalev, knocked him out in the 8th round. That was back in 2017. That was his last fight. The fight before that, he won a unanimous decision against Kovalev. I personally think he lost that fight. A lot of people think he lost that fight. He was having a rough time with Kovalev, but it is what it is. Before that, he fought Alexander Brand, Sullivan Barrera. Yes, Sullivan Barrera has been around for a long time. He fought Paul Smith. Edwin Rodriguez was a problem at the time. Then these names, this is where he was really, the Super 6 did wonders for his career. Chad Dawson was an excellent professional boxer. Just, I don't know, something with his faculties upstairs just couldn't seem to bring it all together. All of that potential. That's why, they say in boxing, the best boxer doesn't win fights. It's the boxer who fights the best on that night. And Chad Dawson, in my opinion, when he went into fights, he was no doubt the best boxer. But he didn't box the best on those nights. And that's why his career was kind of ended prematurely. Before Chad Dawson was Carl Froch. Carl Froch was a bad boy. But he gave Andre Ward, gave him all he could handle, and Andre Ward beat him. And Arthur Abraham. Arthur Abraham was murdering people. Knocking people out left and right. Arthur Abraham, man, had some amazing highlight reel knockouts in his career. Edison Miranda, he knocked out, what's that guy's name, man? Well, it was Darrell. He caught Darrell. Darrell was outboxing him, but he was starting to catch up to him, and he hit him with a shot. It was after he was down, but it wasn't too flagrant, and I think Darrell put on a bit of an act, but they kind of robbed Abraham in that one. But it is what it is. He fought Seiko Bika, who at the time was a very powerful, good fighter. He fought Alan Green. Alan Green had the big left hook, but his career started falling apart. He just couldn't put it all together. Glenn Johnson damn near killed him. They were real close friends, but they had to fight. Glenn Johnson knocked him out. Then he fought Mikkel Kessler. Mikkel Kessler was a monster at Super 6. I'm telling you, all these names I mentioned were part of that Super 6 tournament. Mikkel Kessler. And actually got him out of there by the 11th round. Then some of these other names you're going to see, Edison Miranda, Shelby Pudwell. You won't know who that is, but what really helped Andre Ward was that Super 6 tournament. Now, there are some people who feel when it comes to Andre Ward, and I don't know if I necessarily agree with this, but they feel that his fights were putting people to sleep. And some people say that his style was more boring than Floyd Mayweather's. Now, I will say this. I've never, ever found any of Floyd Mayweather's fights boring. None of them. None of them. And that's because I've been watching Floyd fight since he turned pro. I remember being, I was over in Korea for 2 years. And during that 2 years, I was away from family and everything. And I ordered all of Mayweather's fights, De La Hoya's fights, Ike Cortez fights, Shane Mosley's fights, Cotto's fights, Roy Jones Jr.'s fights, Larry Holmes fights, Lennox Lewis fights, and George Foreman's fights, and Pacquiao's fights, and Hatton's fights, and all on DVD. And they shipped them all out there to me. And that's what I do when I get off work. I go and I watch boxing. And I go down to the gym and train and run through those mountains in Itaewon. Not in Itaewon, it was not Santo, man. I can't remember the name of the damn. It's right there by where I live. I used to run from my damn apartment all the way over there through those mountains, and then run all the way back, and then walk like the last half a mile and cool off because I had been running for like an hour and 45 minutes, and then walk like 30 minutes back home. It was beautiful too, man. I used to enjoy that. But what I'm getting at is, I watched all of that boxing over there. And when I watched Mayweather's fights, I said, man, this man is amazing. And just as he got older with the hand injuries, he started to fight a bit differently. But I never found, maybe if I came in on the tail end of Mayweather's career and didn't know anything about him in the beginning, maybe I'd say his performances were lackluster or boring. But even watching him, I just didn't find it boring. It was entertaining to me, man. But I can understand how somebody can say with Andre Ward, his fights were boring. I totally understand that. I don't think so, but I don't think they were exciting either, because he went into the fight to find a way to win. He was going to fight at his pace. He wasn't going to sit there trying to trade. Very selective about his punches, and he fought with a lot of intelligence. Virgil Hunter was his trainer. Virgil Hunter is like the mad scientist, always whispering, always all about strategy and just about making sure his fighters are mentally strong. And as a result, Andre Ward did very well under his tutelage. And Virgil Hill had been with him, or Virgil Hunter, what's his last name, man? I just call him Virgil. I keep getting him mixed up. Virgil Hill and Hunter with the boxer and the trainer. But anyway, he stayed with, I think it's Hunter, Virgil Hunter. He was with him since he was a little boy, man, and when Andre Ward's dad passed away, and Virgil Hunter, I think, was his godfather. And he took him on his wing and kept training him, and look at what he did with him. But I say all that to say this, right? The Super 6 tournament helped him tremendously. It really did, because I wasn't sure he would survive in that Super 6, but he did. He was a gold medalist and everything, but he showed that there's something to him. And his opponents talked about how physically strong he was and how hard he hit. And if he reminds me of like a, what's his name, Boo Boo Andre. He's not going to just come in there and try to get you out with shots. But if he wanted to, he could. Like you see with Andre now, when he does fight, he lets his hands go. He hurts opponents. He can get them out of there. Andre Ward was the same type of fighter, but that just wasn't his style to come in there and put himself at risk. The more you throw punches, the more openings you create and give your opponent a chance to counter you. He never did that. But I can understand when people feel that he was boring or that he left too soon, because he should have went on and fought Triple G. At that time, Triple G was a killer, but he almost felt like people just wanted him to lose. So he didn't fight Triple G. So it's 2017 he retired to now 2022. There's a lot of opportunities. So he had Bellew. He didn't fight him. He didn't fight Usyk. He didn't fight Triple G. He didn't fight Canelo. Didn't fight David Haye. And, the list goes on and on. All of those fights were there. There was big money fights on the table for him. He just didn't want to do it. And I kind of feel like he should have. But you know, some of these guys just know when it's time to quit. And when you have, I think he has 5 kids, 6 kids, his wife there holding down the house, he wants to spend time with his children, and he did that, and he has no regrets, and you can't blame him. I mean, how much money? It's like when these guys who want $1 billion, half of 500 million. I mean, how much money do you want? Andre Ward, I don't know what his net worth is, but I'm sure he made about, especially that Super 6 tournament, those fights with Kovalev, he had to have walked away from the sport with between $30 and $50 million. I mean, what more do you want to do? You know, what more do you want to do when you have that kind of money? You have your faculties intact, you have a family, loving family, all the support in the world, and there's life after boxing. You got a commentator gig where you're making good money and get to travel. So I applaud him for what he did. And he definitely is, I think, one of the best. And I think he could have continued fighting had he chose to. But some people are speculating that he's dropping this documentary because he's planning a return in 2023. And I just don't think that's the case with him. He's not returning. He's not coming back to fight or nothing like that. I think they need to stop even spreading those rumors. He's been out of the ring too much. I'm not saying he couldn't come back and win, but for what? Why come and put it all on the line? So Andre Ward, man, he's good, man. Some people are saying they doze off they doze off watching him fighting. They doze off hearing the news about his documentary, and they'll probably doze off if he comes back to the ring again, and they like to be awake and they don't want to deal with that. I think Andre Ward, you know, inside the ring was amazing, but outside the ring, an even better ambassador to the sport of boxing. He doesn't use profanity. He doesn't get caught up in the back and forth banter. He tries to be professional at all times, and you can tell when something's agitating him. He knows how to speak up, how to hold his ground, but still be respectful and diffuse situations. I've seen him in a couple instances where somebody was really pressing him, and he spoke up. And the other thing I really like about him, I don't know if people pay attention to it. I pay attention to it. There was a reporter talking to him, and he was the reporter just assumed that Andre Ward was going to agree with what he was saying. And what the reporter was saying to Andre Ward, like, you know how he was talking about unfairness in boxing. And he was like, well, you know, bro, you know how they do us. And Andre was like, who does us? And he was like, the guy was talking about a particular race of people. And Andre Ward was like, well, you know, I don't know about that. You know, he was like, you know, my dad is white, my mother's black. He was like, so when you say, you know how they do us, he's like, I don't really agree with that. And the reporter was caught off guard because I guess he didn't realize that Andre Ward's dad, you know, wasn't black. And I knew that because I've been watching the man's career in documentaries, so I like to know about these fighters and what country they're from, you know, their religion, you know, ethnicity, all that. Like that interests me. If they have kids, you know, all that stuff interests me. Even the sports their kids are in. I guess because I have 4 sons and that's kind of the phase of life I'm in. So I'm always paying attention to those things. I just think it's wonderful. But I was like, yo, I commended him for holding his position because there's a lot of people who would have not spoke up for themselves like that. And the guy was basically saying a bunch of things where Andre Ward obviously took offense to it. He understood what the guy was saying, but he didn't necessarily share that mentality. And if I remember, he was saying something about, and this is what I always say, attitude is everything. Attitude is 95% of it. If you got the right attitude, when it comes to most of things in life, that can get you a long way. It's not always the case, but it can get you a long way. And Andre was kind of hitting on something like that, but I like the way he handled that. He didn't just sit there and decide to be a bandwagonist because this guy was saying something negative that he was going to say something. Just like he's not a bandwagonist when people are saying things positive about other boxers where he doesn't agree with. He holds his position, and he's able to articulate why he doesn't feel a certain way. So all of these things we're going to see addressed in his documentary. I am quite sure. And I think it's going to be more interesting than what people think because it's not like we're going to be watching him fight. Just because maybe you thought his style was boring doesn't mean his story is boring. he has a very interesting story, especially growing up out there in Cali and losing his pops early and the gang life and this and making some changes and, you know, becoming a more spiritual person. A very interesting storyline, man. But I'll be looking forward to see it. But it's going to be dropping, man, on Showtime early 2023. They've been filming it. Can't wait for them to wrap it up and get it pushed out to us, man. I will be tuning in. But that being said, man, y'all keep safe. That's the latest and greatest in Andre Ward, the SOG. Some people call him the GOAT. I don't know. Only GOAT I want to hear about is Curry GOAT. Not no damn self-proclaimed greatest of all time. Muhammad Ali was the greatest of all time. But Andre Ward is definitely great. So that being said, y'all keep safe. Shout out to the veterans. I'm in the break.